Welcome back to the kitchen, guys. We got a great episode coming up for you today. We are making Sunday roast with Yorkshire pudding. Now that may sound very British to you, and you might not be British, but there are few things better on a Sunday with your family than just the perfect roast and a nice little something to dip in those juices, which is what a Yorkshire pudding is. It's a really easy bread product. It takes very little time and it goes great with roast. We're gonna learn today how to make the perfect Yorkie and the perfect roast. It's not that hard. A few simple steps, a few bits of insight and tricks that you need to know to dial it in just right, and you're going to be making a roast that your family will want you to make every single Sunday. Let's start with the most important part, the roast. The meat is the centerpiece of the whole deal, of course. Let's have a brief discussion about the different cuts. Now, probably the most traditional cut for this would be sirloin tip. It's a great cut for a Sunday roast because it's affordable, but it's also got good flavor and a decent amount of tenderness. You can feed your family on a regular weekly basis with that without breaking the bank. Obviously, if we were doing like a holiday roast, like a once a year Christmas special thing, we would go with a standing rib roast, also known as prime rib. Of course, that's much more expensive and not something that anybody's going to do every single Sunday. But in terms of that sirloin tip, it's a great idea. It's totally fine if that's what you find at your grocery store. That's great. But I would really love to turn you on to a different cut that is probably right around the same price. And I got to tell you guys, it's a whole different ball game. This is called picanha, which is a Spanish term. The reason it's often labeled with the Spanish term is because it is a fundamental part of Brazilian barbecue. So a lot of times it is called by its Spanish name. In the States, we call it sirloin cap. So not sirloin tip, sirloin cap. So you might see it labeled sirloin cap. You might see it labeled picanha. You might even see the French term culotte, but that's less common. But this is the queen of roasts. If that prime rib is the king of roasts, this really is the queen. It is so much better than that sirloin tip. The place that it comes from on the cow, it's more tender, it's more juicy, it's more flavorful, and guess what? The best thing is it can be just as affordable as that sirloin tip. I actually got this one at $11 a pound, and the sirloin tip at the same grocery store was $12 a pound. So this, I would say, is twice as good as that sirloin tip in terms of flavor, tenderness, juiciness, everything you want, and I got this one for even cheaper. It really is the queen of all roasts. I think it's well known in South America, and once it gets known in North America, that price is probably going to go up because people are going to find out how great it is. You can make a Sunday roast that is almost as good as prime rib, but you can afford to do it any day of the week, anytime you want. Let's get into breaking this guy down. Oh, one more thing. Let me mention a third one, just in case you can't find. I want to give you guys options because I know stores don't have everything. So if you can't find the picanha sirloin cap and you can't find the sirloin tip, look for a tri-tip. That is also a great option. I think it's even a little bit better than the sirloin tip. Not as good as the picanha, but somewhere in between, also pretty affordable. So tri-tip, also a good option. Now, cleaning this up is very easy. One of the things I love about this roast is that they come about 4 pounds, which means once you've trimmed it down, it's probably going to be somewhere around 3.5, and 3.5 pounds of meat makes the perfect serving size for about 6 people, which is about what you want for a Sunday roast. And the cleanup is super easy. You can see that it has this thick layer of fat on top. That's beautiful. It renders while it cooks. It keeps the meat juicy and moist, and it crisps up really nice when you do it right, the way that I'm going to show you. But in the end, when you cut people's slices, if they don't like a fatty slice, they can just not eat the cap, because the meat itself is actually very lean. So you can have a lean meal if you want, or you can eat that perfectly crisped up, beautiful fat if that's your choice, and you get to make that choice and everybody gets to have what they want. The fat is a little bit thicker here and a little bit thinner as we come down to this part. If we're looking all around, if you were able to feel it, the part where it's thicker is actually kind of hard, and then it gets kind of soft as it comes down. Now, I like to use that as a judge. I will simply remove some of the harder fat and get it down to the point where it's about the level of the softer fat in thickness, just to even everything out so it cooks evenly. So a good sharp knife, and we're just going to peel some back. And this isn't even totally necessary. You can get this right into the oven the way that it is, but it's a little step that I do just to get everything perfect. If you have a little overhang, which I have here, the fat is overhanging the meat, I like to trim that overhang a little bit because it'll expose more meat, just help you with the browning later. But that's really it, guys. I've kind of evened it out now. You can see that the fat is pretty much an even layer all the way around. We've gotten rid of some of that hard fat so it'll render more easily. Let's flip it over and take a look at the other side. Really very clean. You don't have to do much. I'm a perfectionist, so I'm like, oh, there's a bit of silver skin left here. Let me get that off. You can just kind of get under it with your knife, peel it back. And there's a touch more right here, but I think I'll get underneath. That silver skin's stretchy, so you can get underneath, peel it, then you can get a hold of it, hopefully, and lift it up and peel it back, exposing the meat. And there it is. I mean, we have a perfectly clean piece of meat now. This little bit of fat, you can actually save and you can render it down and have beef tallow, which is expensive at the grocery store, but you know, cheap to make at home. I had to do a few of these to test out and get everything dialed in on this recipe, and it made enough beef tallow that I can cook my Yorkshire puddings in it later, which is the best way to cook Yorkshire pudding. Of course, you can use oil if you want, but if you have beef tallow, it's perfect. One last thing I like to do is you can see that there's, you know, this is kind of triangular. There's 3 tips, but there's one tip that's sort of a little bit thinner. And I just like to square that off. You can see there's mostly fat there, and that tail kind of has a tendency to overcook and burn. I like things to be even, so I'm just going to take a little bit of that tail end off. I often sear this off and have a little snack with my dog. That's a great thing you can do with it. But now we have a roast that's about 3.5 pounds. It's going to be perfect for 6 people. There's one last thing I like to do to this fat to help it render and crisp up beautifully. So if you are someone that likes to eat the fat, it will be tender and crispy and not chewy and flabby. I'm going to go through, I'm going to make a cross hatch pattern with my knife, cutting down to the level of the meat, but doing my best not to cut into the meat. So you can see just making slits. Made them one way, turn it, and we're going to make them the opposite way, 90 degrees. Now what that does, it opens up that fat. As you can see, it's going to allow the seasoning to penetrate. It's also going to allow the heat to penetrate. So all that fat renders down, it crisps up, the seasoning gets into the meat, and you get a perfect roast. Here we are on a pan. Seasoning couldn't be easier. It's just salt and pepper. When you have a great piece of beef, you really want to let it sing. Don't cover it up, just help it out. So there's sort of 3 different approaches to seasoning. The one that I'm going to use and that I like the best is dry brining, which means we're going to salt it the night before and put it in the fridge uncovered. The reason that's great is because A, it allows the outside of the meat to dry, which aids in browning. B, it allows the salt to penetrate all the way into the center of the meat so every bite is properly seasoned. And C, when that salt penetrates the meat, it has an effect of denaturing the proteins in such a way that it makes the meat more tender, and it makes the meat hold on to its juices while it cooks because it doesn't tighten up and squeeze them out. So dry brining is the best way to go. Also, you get the seasoning step and the cleaning step out of the way the night before, and then on your Sunday, you can make this amazing dinner and still have a lazy Sunday because the steps are so easy at this point. So the other options are, if you're not going to do it the night before, make sure you salt at least 2 hours in advance to give that salt at least some time to penetrate. And if you absolutely can't do that, if you just don't have the time, make sure you don't salt it until it's just about to go into the oven, because you don't want it sitting there for 30 minutes with salt on it. It draws water out and then the surface is all wet when it goes into the oven, and that's no good for browning. So night before is the best. If you can't do that, do it at least 2 hours before, and if you can't do that, wait until the last second before it goes in the oven to put your salt on. Those are our options. In terms of quantity, I'm not giving you one. Use kosher salt. Chunky is best for this kind of thing. I'm not giving you quantity because basically when a piece of meat is this thick, the amount of salt that can stick potentially to the outside is the amount of salt that you need to salt all of that interior. Because you need that salt to penetrate all this meat. There's going to be so much that isn't exposed. So whatever sticks to the outside is the quantity that is correct for the meat. You don't have to worry about over salting. Just be generous. Get a good solid layer on there, get it all over. And you are not going to over salt, and we are going to do both the fat and the meat side. Don't be afraid. If you want to flex those openings a little bit, and you can even get some on and sort of rub it between the fat, it's always a good idea. And then there'll be some on the pan, and you can use it to salt the sides. Clean my hands up. We'll get some pepper on here. Shout out to my wife for one of the best gifts ever. This pepper mill is so awesome. I would have never bought it for myself because to me, it seemed stupidly expensive for a pepper mill, but as a gift, it's wonderful because I don't have to feel bad. And the moment I got it and started using it, it changed my life. I mean, it's aircraft aluminum, so it'll last you a lifetime, so it's worth the money. The adjustments are so precise. You can go from really coarse to really fine, and most importantly, you don't have to do 50 turns to get half a teaspoon of pepper. It grinds really fast. It just makes life so much easier. So I'll link this below if you guys want to check it out. It is weirdly expensive for a pepper grinder, but like I said, lasts you a lifetime. And once you have it, you're like, I can't believe I've been missing this my whole life. It's amazing. Pretty coarse grind. Just gonna go all over the top. A good amount of pepper is fine because again, we're seasoning a huge piece of meat. It's not gonna make it too spicy. It's just gonna give it flavor. And like we did before, get the sides by picking it up. Pepper doesn't penetrate like salt does, so you don't have to put it on the night before, but it's just easiest. And I think that pepper hydrates a little bit, which brings out the flavor more. A rack. Get it up off the pan so that it's drying out like we talked about. Fat side up. Meat is drying out. It's not sitting in a puddle of its own juices. We're gonna go into the fridge overnight and we'll be ready to make a roast tomorrow. Yorkshire pudding. First of all, I don't know why it's called pudding, guys. The British call everything a freaking pudding, and I can't explain it. If you're British and you might know the answer, leave it in the comments if you can enlighten me as to why this is a pudding and so many desserts are puddings. But whatever, in the United States, we call these popovers. So we do make these in the US. We call them popovers. In Great Britain, they call them Yorkshire puddings. All I know is that they're delicious. They're easy. They have a fluffy, tender crumb, but they're crispy on the outside. They really puff up in this magical way in the oven. And it's the easiest way to make a bread product that you can serve with your roast. It just goes so well with the savory, sopping up those juices. It's everything that we want. I'm gonna mix my batter up tonight because I just put my meat in the fridge, and this batter is best when it sits overnight. It doesn't have to. Put it in the fridge for at least an hour so that the starches can hydrate and so that the proteins can start to form some bonds, which give it structure so that it can rise in the oven and it can stay risen after you take it out. Overnight is best, and we just did our beef and put it in the fridge, so I might as well do our batter now too, get that in the fridge, but at least 1 hour when you mix this up. Let's get to making it. Couldn't be easier. 3 ingredients, technically 4 because there's salt, but we are gonna leave the salt out until just before it goes in the oven because salt inhibits protein formation, and we want those proteins to help this bad boy rise really tall. 3 large eggs. Proportions for Yorkshire pudding are really simple. It's equal amounts by volume of eggs, flour, and milk. You can use whatever milk you like, but I think skim works the best. The less fat, the better rise and the better crispiness you get. So I've got my 3 eggs in. I like to add most of my flour now. This is one of those things where you want to whisk out as many lumps as possible. It's not like pancakes where you can leave some lumps in. You want this to be as smooth as possible. And batters are always smoother when you whisk with less liquid first, and then you add more. So don't be afraid about toughening it up like you are with pancakes. With this, you actually have no problem developing the proteins. You actually want that. So you can whisk till your heart's content, get all those lumps out as best you can. A little more flour. Now that it's starting to thicken up, I'll put a little milk. And some more flour. The rest of our milk. And the last of our flour. And by alternating like that A little bit of liquid, a little bit of flour, a little bit of liquid. It helps us to make a super smooth batter. We don't have to pass it through a sieve or anything. All those lumps are whisked out. Yorkshire pudding is one of those things, when you have a few ingredients and nothing to hide behind, it's like really easy to make a decent one. But you spend the rest of your life trying to make the perfect Yorkshire pudding. Everybody's always searching for the perfect pudding. I think we have this one pretty well dialed in. Follow this technique, you'll be starting out really strong. And there it is. Nice smooth batter. Like I said, we'll save the salt till before it goes in the oven. I'm gonna cover this up. I'm gonna throw it in the fridge with my meat. It'll rest overnight. That'll give us the best, highest, crispiest, most tender Yorkies we can possibly get. And tomorrow, it's gonna be so easy to make this deluxe, delicious meal that isn't expensive, isn't difficult, a few steps ahead of time, and we're gonna have the perfect Sunday roast. Our meat has rested overnight. We've had time for that salt to penetrate and work its magic. Now I like to bring my meat out of the fridge a few hours before I cook it to let it temper up to room temperature. That just helps everything cook evenly. That's up to you. It's always a good idea though. For the cook, we're gonna use a method called the reverse sear. That's where we start it in a low oven. We bring the temperature of the meat up slowly so it cooks really evenly all the way to the center, and it gives that fat cap time to render. Then we're gonna pull it out of the oven. It'll have a moment to rest. We will crank the oven up, and then it goes back in to crisp up the fat and sear the brown side of the meat. It comes out perfect every time. It's awesome. Then when you take it out of the oven, you can carve it right away because it has already rested. Everything's hot and ready to go. Also, it works out so well with our Yorkies because when we pull it out and give it its rest, we can get our Yorkies in there. They take 15 minutes to cook. That's the right amount of rest time here. We pull those out. This goes back in and everything works out beautifully. I'm gonna give you times and temperatures below, but if you have a probe thermometer, I really recommend you use it because every oven's a little different. Every cut of meat is a little different. So follow the temperatures with your probe thermometer if you have it. If not, you can follow the times. So we're looking at an hour for medium rare, thereabouts. About an hour 10 for medium and hour 20 for medium well. I'm not even gonna give you the well done amount because who would ever make this well done? Once you get to medium well, if you don't like any pink, the pink is gone at medium well. All you're doing by going to well done is drying your meat out, and there's no reason to eat it that way unless, I don't know, if you're Donald Trump and you eat your steak well done with ketchup like a baby, that's fine. But don't ever buy steaks from a guy that serves them well done with ketchup. All right, rant aside, we're gonna show you how to use this probe thermometer. We wanna get it into the middle of the meat, the thickest part of the meat. So look at the length of your probe, measure it up against your meat. If I was to, I think a lot of us our instinct would go, oh, that's the fattest part, I'll just stick it in there. But you need to bury the probe all the way, and when you do that, it's practically out the other side. So it's not in the thickest part of the meat. So turn your probe, find the spot where it's gonna hit the center of the meat when it's fully engaged, and that's about there. So I'm gonna come in at that angle. Right there. Make sure you're not going too high or too low. That should end up right in the center of the meat. That's exactly where we want it. So it'll give us the temperature in the thickest part. 115 degrees for medium rare, which is what me and my wife like. So we're gonna get in the oven and then we'll get to making our jus. Let's talk jus, guys. First, maybe some nomenclature. You might be saying, Bobby, do you mean au jus? Jus is the French word for juice because it's made from the juices of our roast. Au jus means with juice. So I wouldn't make my roast with au jus because I'd be saying with juice. I make my roast with jus, or I could say I make my roast au jus, which means with juice. So just to clarify, you don't have to say au jus for the juice. It is just jus. All right, we use the term jus, the French term, because that's the culinary term for all the juices that mix in the bottom of the roasting pan. You have the juices coming out of the meat, you have juices coming out of vegetables that are traditionally made with roasts, and usually there's some wine in the bottom of that pan. So those three things, vegetable juice, meat juice, wine, come together to make the jus, which is just so delicious served over the meat itself. It's just one of those ways where the natural accompaniment is the sauce that comes out in the pan from the roast. There's a problem with that though. It's so good that there's not enough of it. You go to serve everyone, everybody gets like a teaspoon of jus on their meat. They got none for their Yorkshire pudding, and everybody wants more. So we're gonna show you right now in restaurants how we make extra jus. The first part of that is to start with some beef stock. Now in restaurants, I've talked about this before in other videos, in restaurants we use meat scraps and bones to make these delicious gelatin-rich stocks. If you have a homemade broth at home, definitely use it. But I know not everybody has that, and not everybody has a full 8 hours to simmer a broth to get the proper one. So this is how we're going to change this store-bought broth into a restaurant quality broth. We start with unsalted broth, because we are then going to add this beef base, this Better Than Bouillon beef base. That will make it extra beefy, extra flavorful, so much closer to a homemade stock, but we'll still be missing one ingredient, and it's that natural gelatin that comes out of the bones and the connective tissue. But that's easy to duplicate because they sell unflavored gelatin at grocery stores. You can get the powdered kind that comes in the Knox packets. I like to use this leaf gelatin. I just think it has a cleaner flavor, and I love it for that. I will include a link below if you want to get some yourself, but the powdered packets are just fine. We're going to add this now, because it needs just a few minutes to hydrate so that it doesn't clump when you heat it up. Hydration happens at room temperature. It melts once you heat it. Get it all into that liquid. It'll take a few minutes to hydrate. While that's happening, we'll chop up our vegetables, because that's the other element. Remember, it's wine, stock, and veggies. We're gonna make all of that in an extra pan, and we'll have all the jus we need. Let's get this bouillon in there. Going to set this aside to hydrate. Get on those veggies. We are prepped out for our jus. Let's get some butter into a pan. I like to use a style of pan called a saucier here. We're making a sauce after all, so it's a saucepan. It's nice and round, so you can get into all the edges. Butter's melted, getting foamy. We're gonna go in with all our veg all at once. Some people will say you have to do the carrots first because they take longer to soften, or your garlic's gonna burn if you put it in at the same time. It's not true. You can get it in there all at once. It'll cook just fine, especially because for this sauce, we'll be straining our vegetables out at the end. So we don't even need them to be perfectly cooked. They're just there for flavor and aroma. I'm gonna sweat these veggies about 5 minutes, maybe even 3, depending on the heat. You wanna be at about medium heat. Just take it until your onion starts to get translucent and your vegetables begin to soften. They don't have to be totally soft. Onion, celery, and carrot is called a mirepoix in French cooking. That's what they call it. It is such a common way to start sauces, soups, all kind of dishes, because all of those aromatic vegetables, they impart such a nice flavor to the fat that you're cooking in. And it's been about 3 minutes or so, but we can tell we're there because our onion, hopefully you can see, is starting to get kind of translucent, and our other veggies have really brightened up in color and they're just beginning to soften. Now we'll go in with our red wine. Cup of red wine, something dry. I'm using a Montepulciano, but any dry red will do. Again, we're trying to imitate what would happen in the bottom of a roasting pan. So we've got our wine reducing down. We've got our veggies, our aromatic vegetables, imparting all their flavor into the fats that are in the pan, which we use butter for. We're then gonna get this reduced down. I like to take my wine at this point. You can even raise your heat to get it really boiling. I like to take my wine to what we call in French cooking sec. That just means dry. It means we're going to reduce it till this pan is almost dry. It won't be completely dry, but it'll be like a deep syrupy wine, and everything will stop boiling and will start to sizzle again, like when we just had that butter in there. That's how we know we've gotten to sec, and the reason I like to do that is it speeds up the process of softening the wine. You're taking out the harsh flavors of alcohol and the harshness of the acid, and you're getting that smooth, mellow flavor that you get from wine that is slow cooked for an hour in the oven. We're going to speed that process up right here. Took about 5 minutes, and we can see our pan isn't 100% dry, but it's pretty close. I can drag my spatula, and it takes a long time for that space to fill in because that wine has become nice and syrupy. That's exactly what we're looking for. We're going to go in with our broth mixture now. That broth, that gelatin, and that beef base all going in. Bring that up to a simmer. We're going to add one more thing here. Traditionally, a lot of chefs would use cognac. I think that's a little bit $2 up, so I like to use this Spanish brandy from Lustau. It has the same flavor profile, but it's half the price. And I'm gonna go in with 1 ounce of that. Wonderful flavor brandy adds to this kind of sauce. It's a little bit sweet, rich notes of like vanilla and wood from the barrel aging. It just takes your sauce up a notch to another level that, you know, people would eat it and they don't know quite why it's so good. They can't tell, but there's just something about it that's so much better than ones they've had in the past. And little tricks like that, a little bit of brandy. We're gonna bring this to a simmer, and then we are gonna cook it down. We have 4 cups of broth right now. We're gonna cook it all the way down to 1 cup. You're really reducing and concentrating those flavors just like they would concentrate in the bottom of the pan in the oven. And that is how we create a faux jus, a jus that we made in the pot instead of being directly beneath the beef. Of course, we're going to use those beef drippings. We're not going to waste them when our beef comes out of the oven. Those drippings will go into the pot as well to give us all that extra natural beef flavor. So reduce it down to 1 cup, then we'll strain everything out and we'll have the perfect jus. We've got a little simmer going. Now here's a step that isn't 100% necessary, but I like to do it. It's just skimming. We skim the excess fat off the top of our stock. You can use what I have here, which is a fine mesh skimmer, or you can just use a spoon. That's fine as well. Like I said, not 100% necessary, but it's something we chefs do. If you lose a little bit of onion, that's fine. It makes the final jus crystal clear and just tastes really smooth and really clean. So it's just a nice extra step. You can skip it if you want to, or you can be, you know, super chefy and do a skim, just until all that fat and that little bit of protein scum are gone. For this kind of jus, it really only takes 1 skim and then you're done. You just set it aside and let it simmer till we reduce to 1 cup. Now I have 2 more ingredients that I'm not putting in just yet. We have our bay leaves. These are fresh bay leaves. I buy them fresh and then I keep them in a zip top bag in my freezer because fresh bay leaves have so much flavor and dried bay leaves taste like almost nothing. I don't even know why they sell them. So if you can get the fresh ones, throw them in a zip top bag, put them in your freezer. They'll last you forever and they taste so much better. Bay leaves, and we've got our cracked black pepper. I'm gonna save both of those for the last 5 minutes or so of simmering, just because those flavors cook out so quickly. Even though bay leaves are a hard herb, if you get them in right at the end, last 5, maybe 10 minutes, they just give you so much more bright flavor and it's so much better that way. All right, our beef has come up to temperature. Of course, we haven't completely finished it yet. We haven't done our browning stage, but this has got our internal temperature where we want it. One thing I want to mention is, I said earlier that I always take mine out a few hours. Actually, for this size beef, I go as much as 4 hours at room temperature before it goes into the oven, which is the best for even cooking. But if you don't do that, if you go into the oven cold, it's going to take longer than the hour that I cited, which is why these probe thermometers are great, because then you know exactly when you got there and you don't have to fiddle with times. But our meat is cooked through. 115 for medium rare. That's not the final temperature. It will rest up as it's resting. That's just the temperature we pull it out of the oven at. I'm going to set it aside. How hot is this? That cooled down pretty quick. Set that aside to rest. I'm going to crank my oven up to 425 degrees. That's the temperature we're going to cook our Yorkies at. Now remember, we're not going to waste this jus that's in the bottom. Okay, I do need some pot holders for that pan. This juice that's in the bottom of the pan, we're gonna save it for our jus. There's not a ton of juice that comes out with this low and slow cooking method, which is actually kind of a good thing because it's staying in your meat, making your meat nice and juicy. But the little bit we do have, we're gonna add back into our jus, and that's gonna give us extra beefy flavor. We have reduced by about 2/3, which means we have about 5 to 10 minutes left. Perfect time to add our bay leaves in, our black pepper, and those reserved beef drippings. That is smelling really beefy. It's gonna be delicious. About 5 to 10 more minutes, we'll get it down to 1 cup, and this will be the perfect jus. We are about there. We are looking good. Nice body to this sauce. Not too thick, just enough to stand up a little bit on the plate, and that's all we're looking for. Let's see if I hit it right. I'm guessing, you know, that we're at about a cup. Just a mesh strainer to take all the particles out, so we have just a smooth sauce left over. You don't want to push anything through, but just move it around. Make sure you get all your delicious sauce. We don't want to waste anything. Let's see where we ended up, huh? Just a little shy of a cup, just a little shy, and that's fine. We'll have plenty of sauce for everybody. It's extra concentrated. Let's get a look, and a little taste. We can see that this sauce has some nice body. It's not a gravy, it's a jus. You just want a little bit of body to it. Now there is a debate with Sunday roast. Do you want gravy or do you want jus? I fall in the jus camp because I think it matches with the beef better. It lets the beef sing and speak for itself, and after all, it's coming from the natural beef juices, so it's the perfect pairing. I think gravy is a little heavy and it covers up the flavor of good meat. But if you're a gravy person, I do have a gravy episode. You can check that out. I use poultry broth in that gravy. Just switch it to beef broth and you can make yourself a nice gravy. Let's give it a little taste. Perfect. Right amount of salt, because we started with that no salt broth, so we could add that bouillon and then reduce it way down and it doesn't get too salty. That beautiful flavor of red wine. Those bay leaves are really popping because they're fresh and we added them at the end. It just tastes meaty from adding in those extra beef juices. It tastes meaty, it tastes a little bit like wine, a little bit like those aromatic herbs and vegetables, and it's exactly what you want in a jus. Let's move on to making our Yorkies. It's Yorkie time, guys. We have our oven at 425. Now you remember I said earlier that I had, when I was testing this recipe, I had leftover beef fat. I rendered that into beef tallow, which is the perfect cooking fat for Yorkies. Of course, they're going with beef, so that beef flavor works so well. You don't have to have it. If your grocery store sells it, that's great. You want to use it. Otherwise, you could use a neutral high smoke point oil like avocado oil, or something a little more flavorful like peanut oil works great. You get that like Five Guys fries kind of flavor in your Yorkies, which is awesome. But I'm using beef tallow today. It's about a half tablespoon per muffin cup. We are using just a regular 12 cup pan, but we're only using 6 of the cups. We're making 6 puddings because this recipe serves 6. Got a little left over. Great cooking fat for later. This is going into our 425-degree oven with just the oil to get it preheated. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes, then we add our batter. I've got my batter right here. I transferred it to a pourable container to make it easier to get it into the pan. Remember, we left our salt out. We're gonna add it now. We leave that salt out while it rests because it can impede the formation of the proteins, which gives us lift. Get a whisk that salt in. This batter had a full 24 hours to sit in the fridge, which is great. That's gonna give us the ultimate rise in the oven. I'm gonna show you guys my tricks to keep them risen. Basically, you're looking at something that's basically a souffle. So it's gonna really souffle up, rise up high in the oven, and you wanna keep it high. You wanna get it to set and not have it collapse on you when it comes out. And when we get it in there, we'll show you my tricks. It works every time. It makes Yorkshire pudding so easy, so fluffy, so delicious. They're gonna be awesome. I have let my oil preheat for the full 15 minutes because I want it extra hot for extra loft. Now this is the only part of this recipe where we need to move kind of fast and concentrate. We're gonna pull this out and immediately, because we want that oil hot, we're immediately gonna go in with our batter, pouring it directly into the center of each muffin cup, filling them up to just below the top, and then we pop it right back into the oven and get that door closed so that those muffins, those puddings, rise as much as possible. So here we go. Let's give it a try. Right back into the oven. And we should see some serious loft in about 5 to 10 minutes. Alright guys, you can see we have amazing loft right now. I don't know why I'm whispering, probably just because I feel like they're so delicate, I don't want to scream. We have amazing loft. We don't want to kill that loft by creating a huge thermal shock. So instead of just taking these out of the oven, what I'm going to do is turn the oven off, and then I'm going to just crack the door to let the heat release slowly. We will lose just a touch of loft, you always do, but we're gonna let them sit in there for 5 minutes with the door cracked. We'll let everything come down slowly. We'll maintain as much loft as possible. Five minutes is up. Let's venture to open the door all the way and see if we can maintain our loft. And look at that. Minimal sinking. Hardly any loss of loft because we did that 5-minute rest with the door cracked. That's perfect. Let's get these bad boys out and we're gonna move on to our steak. Our puddings are done. Our meat is rested. We've let that temperature of the inside of the meat come back down. Those juices redistribute. Everything has evened out. Now we've raised our oven all the way back up to 500 from the 425 from the Yorkies. This works, the recipe works great. You start at 225 for the meat, then you go up to 425 for the puddings, then all the way up to 500 for the last 5 minutes just to sear the outside of your meat. This fat cap has rendered beautifully. It's dried out. It's perfect for crisping. As soon as it hits there, 5, maybe tops 10 minutes to crisp it up and to sear the bottom, and everything is going to be perfect. We can carve it right when it comes out of the oven. We don't even have to wait. Let's get it in. It has been 5 minutes, guys. Our roast is looking crispy and beautiful. Nice sear on the outside. Let's get a look at that. You can see beautiful sear on the meat, deep mahogany brown. That fat cap has totally crisped up now. If you're someone that likes the fat, it's crispy and juicy and perfect. If you're someone who doesn't like fat, all the fat in this meat is on that cap, so you can eat right around it if you don't want it. This is perfect. It's ready to carve. Let's get it on a plate and let's have a taste. Moment of truth, guys. Let's slice into this bad boy and see what we got. I'm gonna go towards the center just so we can see a center piece. Oh, on this, the grain on this is running in this direction. Usually we slice steak against the grain, but because we're carving a roast, we're gonna carve this with the grain so that when it goes onto the plate, the guest is carving against the grain. So that's just the way it ends up working out with this kind of roast. Cut with the grain here, and then your guests will be cutting against the grain so they get the most tender bite. Let's give this guy a slice. Let's see what we have. Look at that perfection. Unbelievable. Just wall to wall, perfect medium rare. So juicy. It's going to be so tender. The meat is holding on to its juices because we cooked it low and slow first and then just gave it a quick high heat sear. We're not drying that meat out. Let me cut myself a slab. You can, of course, on roasts, you can go with a thick cut or a thin cut, depending on what your guests like. I love a thick cut, especially with this picanha. This picanha is tender. It's tender like prime rib is tender. You don't have to go thin because you can have a nice juicy bite and you don't have to worry about it. It's a beautiful tender steak. I'm gonna cut myself a decent sized slab, caveman slab here. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Let me grab my plate. Let's get this guy on there. Wonderful, juicy, pretty, perfectly medium rare. Like I said, I've got times and temperatures for medium and medium well if that's what you want. I love medium rare. I'm gonna get a Yorkshire pudding on here. We're gonna hit it with a jus and we're gonna give it a taste. Here we go, guys. It smells so good in here. My dog is right by my side. She knows what's going on. Before I drop the jus on, I just wanna get a look at this Yorkie. Let's check out the texture. First of all, you can see beautiful loft, crispy on the outside. How's that inside looking? Flaky, nice and soft, pulls apart, beautiful crumb. Get some jus on this. Don't need a ton. Just give your meat a little coating, get a little bit for your Yorkie. Beautiful. That is looking fantastic. I can't wait to get into this. Let's give it a try. This meat is so tender. Look at that bite. Unbelievable, guys. Unbelievable cut of beef. It's so juicy. It's so tender. It's so beefy. It's everything I want. It's almost as good as prime rib. Guys, If like prime rib is up here, this picanha is like right there. It's almost as good as the prime rib, and it's $11 a pound. Prime rib at best 35 a pound, maybe up to 50 a pound. This is $11 a pound. I found this at a bad price for this would be $15 a pound. It is so incredibly prime rib like. That's all I can say. It reminds me so much of eating a great slab of prime rib. It's a perfect roast. It carves off as a perfect steak. That jus, just a little bit of spice from the wine and the black pepper, a little bit of that acidic bite, along with that beefiness from the broth, that a little bit of body from the gelatin, but it's not thick. It's not overwhelming the meat. It just kind of sits up on the plate. Let's give this pudding a try. Bang, spot on. A little bit of egg flavor. It's rich. It's crispy on the outside. It's tender on the inside. It sops up that jus perfectly. Forget about it. Everything you want from a Sunday roast. You got your Yorkshire pudding, perfect texture. You got an amazing jus. You didn't have to make some kind of crazy 8-hour stock. We showed you how to do it with the store-bought stuff. An $11 a pound picanha that eats like prime rib. This is the best Sunday roast you're ever gonna have, and you can have it once a week because it's so affordable and it's so easy to make, you guys. It's like Christmas every Sunday. I can't say enough about it. I really hope you make it. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for tuning in again. Remember, all the ingredients and the measurements are right below in the description. Please like and subscribe so we can bring you many more recipes. Enjoy your Sunday, enjoy your roast. We'll see you next time. But before we go, let's re-roll that B-roll.